The music stopped. Every head in the room turned toward the doorway. The bride's smile froze, mid-laugh, her hand still wrapped around her champagne glass. The groom stood frozen, like he'd just seen a ghost. And in many ways, he had. There she was, wearing a simple blue dress that had seen better days. Her hair pulled back into a low, tired bun. Her face was older, but there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She had 3 small children by her side, all holding onto her skirt with tiny, nervous hands. They were identical triplets, no more than 5 years old. They had their mother's deep brown eyes, but their features were a mirror image of Daniel's. The room fell into an eerie silence as they all stood there, like time had frozen in place. She didn't wait for anyone to say anything. She didn't need to. Olivia took one deliberate step forward, the children following in her shadow. They didn't speak. They just looked up at her, as if this moment was completely normal. They had been here before, in places like this, waiting for something. Waiting for someone to take notice. Daniel's face went pale, his hands trembling. He tried to hide it, to pull himself together, but it was too late. He had already been exposed. It wasn't just his past that was coming back to haunt him. It was the truth. Olivia's voice broke through the silence, calm but piercing. "Congratulations, Daniel," she said. Her voice was steady, almost too steady. "Thought I'd drop by and give you something you left behind." She reached into her worn leather purse and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It looked simple enough. A single sheet of paper, creased from being folded over and over. It wasn't big, just a standard letter-sized sheet, but the weight it carried in the room was immense. For a long moment, Daniel didn't move. His eyes were locked on that piece of paper, his face contorted with confusion and disbelief. It was as if he didn't even recognize her anymore. Or perhaps, he just didn't want to. The guests stood in stunned silence, their eyes darting between the bride, the groom, and Olivia, trying to make sense of the impossible scene unfolding in front of them. Some of them were whispering, others were frozen, unsure of what to do. The bride, Tiffany, the woman Daniel was supposed to marry today, was the first to speak. Her voice was tight, trembling with a mix of shock and confusion. Who are you?" she asked, her voice quivering. Olivia looked at her without blinking. She could see the fear in Tiffany's eyes. She could sense it, a fear that wasn't just about Olivia's presence in that room, but about what she might do next. What she might reveal. "I'm the one you didn't care enough about to keep," Olivia said softly, the words slicing through the air. Her eyes never left Daniel's, and for a moment, it seemed like she was speaking only to him alone. Tiffany took a step back. Her fingers clenching around the edge of her champagne glass, her eyes flicking between the two of them. She was trying to hold her composure, but there was a crack in her confidence. Something wasn't right. And she knew it. But Daniel's face told a different story. It was a mask, an expertly crafted mask of indifference, but his eyes betrayed him. They were wide with a mixture of shock, guilt, and something else. Was it fear? Regret? Or was it simply the realization that everything he had tried so hard to bury was now standing right in front of him? Olivia stepped closer to him, holding the paper just out of his reach. It was almost like a game, like she was daring him to ask for it. To plead for it. But he didn't. He stood there, rooted to the spot, frozen in time. "I brought this for you," she continued, her voice quieter now, almost intimate. "You didn't want me, but you never asked about them, did you?" She glanced down at the 3 small children standing beside her. Their wide, innocent eyes were locked on Daniel, unblinking, as if waiting for him to say something. Do something. Daniel's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He opened it again, his throat dry, struggling to find words that would make sense of this situation. But there were no words. Olivia turned to the children. These are your siblings, Daniel. The room seemed to hold its breath. The triplets blinked in unison, as if they had rehearsed this moment for years. These are your children, Olivia said again, her voice sharper now. The ones you walked away from. The ones you chose to forget. The paper in her hand fluttered, just slightly, as she held it out towards him, but he still didn't take it. He couldn't. The truth was too overwhelming. And then, Olivia did something unexpected. She let the paper go. It slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor between them. Daniel didn't move. Tiffany, looking between Daniel and Olivia, finally spoke again, her voice cracking. What is this? What do you want from us? Olivia's eyes shifted to Tiffany, and for the first time, she smiled. But it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was cold. Calculated. I don't want anything from you, Tiffany, Olivia said softly. I just wanted to make sure he knew. I wanted to make sure that no matter how far he runs, the truth always follows. It always finds you. Daniel's gaze shifted to Tiffany, then back to Olivia. It was clear now, he had no idea what she was talking about. No clue what she was really holding over him. But Olivia knew. She knew exactly what that paper contained. And she was going to make sure everyone else knew too. Olivia stepped back, her eyes never leaving Daniel's. She glanced briefly at the triplets, who were still standing quietly beside her. No one had moved to pick up the paper yet. It sat there on the floor, crumpled and fragile. With one last, piercing look, Olivia turned on her heel and walked out of the room. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Each one louder than the last. As the door swung shut behind her, the music began to play again, but it was different this time. The guests had no idea how to react, how to recover. The atmosphere had shifted from celebration to confusion, to something darker, something unknown. But Olivia was gone. And the paper was still there. And Daniel was left standing, staring at the place where she had been. The truth was out. And now, the real question was, what was he going to do about it? The air in the room had thickened. It wasn't just the shock of Olivia's sudden appearance or her cryptic words, it was something deeper. Something that felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. The wedding, which had just moments ago been a celebration of love, had been shattered. The guests, who had gathered to witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of Daniel's life, now found themselves in the middle of a drama no one could have anticipated. Daniel stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the floor, where the crumpled paper still lay untouched. The music had resumed, but it felt hollow, as though the sound was just a distant hum to cover the noise in his head. His hands were trembling slightly, a stark contrast to his usually composed demeanor. The moment Olivia had entered, the facade he had so carefully built over the years had crumbled. There was no denying it now. The past had returned, and with it, the truth. But what was that truth? What did Olivia want from him? And more importantly, what did the paper in her hand say? Tiffany, the bride, stood beside him, her face pale. She glanced nervously between Daniel and the door through which Olivia had disappeared. The guests, too, were uncertain about what to do next. Some whispered among themselves, others were simply frozen, unsure of what had just happened. There was a tension now, a quiet pulse that ran through the room. Daniel finally moved. He bent down slowly, picking up the piece of paper from the floor. His fingers brushed over it briefly, feeling the creases, the weight of it. He stared at the paper for what felt like an eternity, as if reading it without opening it, trying to understand what it meant. Then, with shaking hands, he unfolded it. It wasn't just one page. It was a letter. A letter that had been written so many years ago, but had never been sent. And when he saw the name at the top of the page, his blood ran cold. To Daniel Stevens. The words were familiar, but they brought with them a flood of memories Daniel had spent years trying to suppress. It was a letter from Olivia, written back when they were still together, when their world hadn't been torn apart by the invisible line between rich and poor. Back when they were just two people in love, trying to figure out life, before the difference in their social status had driven a wedge between them. The words she had written back then flooded his mind. "I don't know how to say this without making you angry," she had written in the letter. "But I'm scared. I'm scared of what you're becoming, of what your family wants for you. They don't care about me, Daniel. They never did. I can feel the pressure in the air whenever they look at me. You say they're not like that, but I see it in their eyes. I'm not good enough for you. And I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending to be." At the time, Daniel had read the letter with guilt, with a mix of frustration and helplessness. He knew that Olivia's insecurities were real, but he had been caught between two worlds, the life he had with her, and the expectations of his wealthy family, who had never fully accepted her. But now, years later, that letter felt different. It felt like a betrayal. As Daniel read the rest of the letter, a sinking feeling settled in his stomach. Olivia had been right. She had been right about everything. She had been right about his family, right about the pressures they had placed on him. But he had never been able to see it clearly before. His need to belong, to prove himself to them, had clouded his judgment. And now, standing here on the day of his wedding, that past, the one he thought he had buried, was standing in front of him in the form of Olivia and their 3 children. Tiffany, still standing by his side, had her hand on his arm, her grip tight, but her voice was softer now. "What does it say, Daniel?" He didn't answer right away. He couldn't. He didn't want to. Because deep down, he knew that whatever the letter said, it wouldn't matter. The damage had already been done. Olivia was gone, and so were the dreams of the life they could have had. Tiffany's voice broke through his thoughts. "Daniel, please. Talk to me. I don't understand what's happening. Who are they? Why didn't you tell me about them?" "About her?" Daniel's silence only deepened the tension in the room. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Tiffany had known nothing about Olivia, nothing about the past that Daniel had tried so hard to forget. And now, Olivia had appeared in the most dramatic way possible, with triplets in tow, and the entire world was watching. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was trying to process everything. The paper. Olivia's words. The kids. The past. His whole life was being exposed in front of a room full of people, and he had no idea how to explain it. "I didn't want to hurt you," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want anyone to know. I thought I could leave it all behind." Tiffany's face hardened, her eyes narrowing. "But you didn't leave it behind, Daniel. You just hid it. You kept it a secret, even from me." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. His gaze turned back to the paper, the letter, in his hands. The truth had been written years ago. And now, the truth was staring him in the face. The wedding was over. The guests began to file out of the room. Still whispering, still unsure of what they had just witnessed. No one could leave fast enough. The atmosphere had shifted completely, like a weight had settled over everything. The laughter and cheers had been replaced with silence, and the joy of the day had evaporated. Tiffany's grip on his arm loosened, and she stepped back. Her eyes were filled with disappointment, but more than that, there was a deep, aching sadness. The kind that came from realizing that someone you loved had lied to you. Had hidden parts of themselves, entire sections of their life, from you. "I think I need some air," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to think." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone at the center of the room. He was alone now, just like he had been when he made the decision to walk away from Olivia all those years ago. But this time, the consequences were far greater. This time, the price of his choices was too high to ignore. He looked down at the letter once more, his heart pounding in his chest. The paper felt heavier now, as if it carried not just the weight of his past, but the weight of everything he had lost. Outside, the sun had started to set, casting an orange glow through the windows. The guests had all left, the room was empty, and Daniel stood there in the silence, holding the letter in his hands. The truth had returned, and it wasn't going anywhere. As he looked at the triplets, who had been abandoned at the door, standing in their bright clothes, their eyes still wide with curiosity, he realized one undeniable fact. The past had come for him, and there was no running from it this time. The wedding venue, once filled with laughter and music, now sat in an eerie silence. The aftermath of Olivia's sudden reappearance had left the air thick with tension. The guests had trickled out, whispers still echoing in the hallways. The staff had begun clearing the tables, but their movements felt like part of the mourning process, the sadness too deep to ignore. Daniel was still standing there, motionless, his hands gripping the crumpled letter Olivia had left behind. The paper felt heavier than ever. As if it carried the weight of years of decisions, mistakes, and things left unsaid. He had no idea how long he had been standing there. Time felt as though it had stopped, the world outside continuing without him, but inside, his mind was racing. He couldn't focus. He couldn't think clearly. Olivia had returned, and she wasn't alone. She had brought the children, their children, and with them, a devastating truth. The letter, that one piece of paper, had revealed everything. Daniel had thought he had buried his past. But Olivia's reappearance had dragged it into the light, forcing him to confront it, whether he was ready or not. Where did it all go wrong? The question echoed in his mind. Was it the moment his family had rejected Olivia? Was it? When he had tried to please everyone around him, only to realize that in doing so, he had lost the one person who truly mattered? His eyes flickered to the empty space where Tiffany had stood moments before. The woman he had been set to marry, the woman who, until today, had no idea about the past that had shaped him. The woman who had walked away in confusion, her heart shattered by the secrets he had kept hidden. He didn't blame her. The anger, the betrayal, it was all bubbling up inside him, swirling with guilt, regret, and disbelief. How could he have allowed things to get this far? How could he have abandoned them? Tiffany was outside, sitting on the steps in the cool evening air. She hadn't gone far. She didn't know where to go. She needed to think, to make sense of everything. She had loved Daniel. She had believed in their life together. But this was a betrayal unlike any she had ever known. She felt like she was drowning in a sea of unanswered questions. How could he have kept this from me? Her fingers clutched the fabric of her dress as she stared at the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting a pale golden hue over the scene. Her thoughts raced back to their earlier conversations, to the way Daniel had spoken of his past, always so distant, so unwilling to talk about the people he had known before her. She had never pushed him. She hadn't felt the need to. After all, they were building a life together. They had their future to look forward to. But now, everything felt like a lie. The sound of footsteps on gravel pulled her from her thoughts, and she looked up to see Daniel walking toward her. His face was drawn, his posture stiff. He looked like a man carrying a heavy burden, one that was impossible to shake. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Tiffany stood up, wiping her eyes quickly, though the redness of her face betrayed her. "You never meant for any of this?" She repeated, the hurt in her voice impossible to mask. "Daniel, you kept this from me. For years. And you expect me to just, what? Forgive you?" He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand, stopping him before he could say another word. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay. This isn't something you can just sweep under the rug. I don't even know who you are anymore. The man I thought I knew, he's gone." The words stung. They were sharp and true. And Daniel felt every single one of them. He knew he had screwed up. But how could he explain it? How could he make her understand the reasons behind his actions? How could he make her see the world he had been trapped in, the world that had led him to make decisions he now regretted? Tiffany sighed, stepping back. "I need time, Daniel. I need time to process everything that's happened today. You've given me no choice." Daniel nodded. "I understand." He stood there for a moment longer, watching her retreat into the distance. His heart ached, but he couldn't find the strength to move forward. Not yet. Instead, his thoughts drifted back to Olivia. To the letter. To the children. He still couldn't believe it. How had he gotten here? Hours passed. The guests had all left, and the venue was empty. The lights in the ballroom were dimmed, the music silenced. Daniel was still there, sitting at a table, staring at the crumpled letter on the table before him. The world felt as though it was closing in around him. He couldn't breathe. The truth of the past had slammed into him with such force that he felt like he was drowning in it. He had always thought he was in control. He had convinced himself that he had done the right thing by walking away from Olivia, that he had been doing what was best for both of them. But now, as he sat in the empty room, it was all so clear. He had been afraid. Afraid of disappointing his family, of being seen as weak. So he had let Olivia go. He had pushed her aside, pretending that his life with Tiffany was everything he had ever wanted. But Olivia had never truly left. She had always been there, a part of him he couldn't shake, no matter how hard he tried. And now, she was back. And she wasn't alone. 3 children. His children. He picked up the letter again, reading it over. It was as though the words had never really sunk in until now. "I'm scared of what you're becoming, Daniel," Olivia had written. "I can feel the pressure from your family. They don't care about me. They never did. But I still love you. I always will." She had loved him. And he had thrown it all away. His hand shook as he lowered the letter, staring at the empty space in front of him. The triplets' faces flashed in his mind. How would he ever face them? How could he explain his absence? How could he tell them that their father had been too afraid to fight for them? Too weak to do what was right? He stood up, his legs unsteady, and walked to the large windows that overlooked the darkened streets. He needed air. He needed space to think. But what was there to think about? The truth had already come to light. There was no escaping it. And he knew, no matter what happened next, he had to confront the past. He had to make things right with Olivia, with the children, and with himself. The next morning, the world felt different to Daniel. It wasn't just the emptiness of the venue or the pain that still lingered from the previous day. It was the weight of the truth crashing down on him like a wave he couldn't outrun. The house felt strangely quiet as he moved through the rooms. Everything was still, frozen in place, as if time had paused. Even the kitchen, with its pristine countertops and polished surfaces, felt devoid of life. It didn't belong to him anymore. Not truly. His world had been turned upside down, and he had no idea what came next. He had not seen Tiffany since the wedding, and she had not answered his calls or texts. He could feel the distance growing between them with every passing hour. A part of him wished he could just go back to the way things were before Olivia had walked in with those 3 children. Before the letter had exposed everything he had tried so hard to bury. But there was no going back. The past was always waiting, just around the corner, ready to confront him. The letter. The children. Olivia. It was all too much. The sunlight streamed through the windows as Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his head buried in his hands. The silence pressed down on him, suffocating him, and he felt a sudden rush of panic. He needed to do something. Anything. But where did he even begin? The phone buzzed on the table in front of him, snapping him from his thoughts. It was a message from his sister, Clara. "Daniel, I'm worried. Where are you? I've been trying to reach you." Daniel's fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of how to respond. Clara had been the only one who had stood by him through the tough times. She had always been his confidant, the one person who understood him better than anyone else. But even she didn't know everything. She didn't know about Olivia. And she certainly didn't know about the children. He typed a quick response. "I'm fine. Just need some time. I'll call you later." The reply came almost instantly. "Don't hide from this, Daniel. You can't. Please talk to me." Daniel stared at the words for a long time. He knew Clara was right. He couldn't keep running from his problems. He had to face what was coming, no matter how hard it was. His phone buzzed again, but this time, the message wasn't from Clara. It was a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then opened it. It was a photo. A blurry image of the triplets, standing together in front of a small house. And beneath it, a simple message. "Time's running out, Daniel. They need you." His heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the message. Who had sent it? And why? The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Olivia. It had to be Olivia. His breath caught in his throat, and he quickly replied. "Where are you? What's going on?" But the message went unanswered. For a long moment, he sat there, the phone in his hands, trying to process what he had just seen. The photo, the message, everything felt wrong. He couldn't help but wonder what was happening to Olivia and the kids. Were they okay? Were they in danger? Before he could think any more about it, another message came through. "Meet me. Same place. Tonight. Don't bring anyone." It was Olivia. He knew it. That evening, Daniel drove to the meeting spot, his mind racing the entire way. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. The address Olivia had sent him was a small, run-down building on the outskirts of town. It was tucked away in an alley, its windows boarded up. The doors barely hanging on their hinges. There was something unsettling about the place, something that made his skin crawl. He parked his car at the far end of the street, his eyes scanning the area. There was no sign of anyone, but he knew he had to go inside. He had to face Olivia. He had no other choice. With every step he took toward the door, his heart beat faster. What was she going to tell him? What did she need from him? He pushed the door open slowly, the creaking sound echoing through the empty room. It was dimly lit, and dust filled the air, giving the place an abandoned feel. The only sound was the soft shuffle of his footsteps as he entered, the door slamming shut behind him with a finality that made him flinch. Then he saw her. Olivia stood at the far end of the room, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. The triplets were sitting on the floor, their backs to him, their small figures huddled together. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she just stood there, watching him, as though waiting for him to make the first move. "Olivia," Daniel's voice cracked as he spoke her name, the weight of everything between them suffocating him. "What's going on? Why did you bring me here?" Olivia finally spoke, her voice low and distant. "I didn't want to. I didn't want any of this, Daniel. But you need to know what's happening. They need you." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Daniel's eyes darted to the children, who hadn't turned around. They looked small, fragile, and it broke something inside of him to see them like that. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. "Why didn't you tell me about them?" Olivia's face softened, and for the first time since he'd seen her, she looked vulnerable. "I wanted to, Daniel. I really did. But I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't think you'd be able to leave everything behind." And now, her voice trailed off, and she glanced at the children. "Now what?" Daniel asked, his pulse quickening. She hesitated before speaking again. "Now they're in danger. People are looking for them. People are looking for me. And if they find us," she didn't finish the sentence, but the fear in her eyes was enough. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of danger?" "The kind that doesn't let you escape," Olivia said quietly. "I've been running for years, Daniel. And now I'm out of options. I need your help. I need you to protect them." The room seemed to close in around him as Olivia's words sank in. He didn't know what to believe, what was real, or how deep the danger really went. But one thing was clear, she was desperate. And so were the children. He looked at the triplets. Their small faces were still turned away from him, their heads bent low as though trying to make themselves as small as possible. "I don't know what's happening," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'll help you, Olivia. I'll help all of you. I don't know how, but I will." She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "Thank you, Daniel. Thank you." But even as she spoke, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. That the danger, whatever it was far worse than either of them could have imagined. And as the shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, Daniel realized that his life, his carefully constructed life, was unraveling faster than he could keep up. The past had caught up with him. And this time, there was no running from it. The tension in the room was suffocating, a thick, inescapable fog that seemed to cling to Daniel's skin, making him feel as if he could barely breathe. He had been in many tight situations before, times when he had to make decisions under pressure, but this felt different. This was deeper, more dangerous. The stakes were no longer just about his future with Tiffany or reconciling with the choices he had made. The stakes were about survival, and that survival was not just his own. He glanced at Olivia again, standing in front of him with her hands clasped tightly together, the fear in her eyes unmistakable. She wasn't the woman he remembered, strong, resilient, full of life. The Olivia standing in front of him now was fragile, broken, haunted by something far darker than he could even comprehend. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice trembling. "They'll find us if we stay." She cut herself off, as if the words she was about to say were too dangerous to utter. Daniel's heart raced. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, a cold, gnawing sensation that only intensified with each passing second. Who were they? And more importantly, what did they want with Olivia, and her children? "I need answers, Olivia," Daniel said, his voice quieter now but no less demanding. He had already given her so much of his trust, so much of his time and energy, but it wasn't enough. He needed to understand what was happening. His thoughts were muddled, and with every passing moment, the danger seemed to grow. "What is going on? Who is after you?" Olivia's eyes flickered with panic. She turned toward the children, who were still seated on the floor, their heads buried in their little hands as if trying to block out the noise of the world around them. She took a deep breath, steeling herself before speaking. "Daniel," she began, her voice shaking, "I never wanted to drag you back into this. But I don't have a choice anymore. I've been running for years, from people, from circumstances that I couldn't control. But now they're here. They're close. And if we don't leave tonight, I'm afraid." She trailed off, her words hanging in the air, unspoken but all too clear. The terror in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. "Who are they?" Daniel pressed, his frustration mounting. "Why didn't you ever tell me? All these years, why keep me in the dark?" Olivia looked away for a moment, her gaze distant as if she were searching for something beyond the confines of the small, dimly lit room. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "They're people from my past, Daniel. People I thought I'd left behind. I was a different person back then, someone who did things, terrible things." She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the children again, their innocent faces hiding the trauma they had endured. Daniel stepped closer, his pulse quickening. "What kind of things, Olivia? What are you not telling me?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment, Daniel thought she wasn't going to answer. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable, before she finally spoke again. "I was involved in something dangerous," she said, her voice low. "I made mistakes, big ones. People died because of me. And the people who were behind all of it, they've been looking for me ever since. They've been watching me. And now they're after the kids." Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat. The gravity of her words hit him like a physical blow. People had died. And now they were after the kids. "Why?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why the kids?" Olivia's face tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. "The children, they're part of it. They have something that they want. It's not just about me anymore, Daniel. It's about them." Daniel felt the pieces of the puzzle starting to shift into place, though the image still seemed too unclear, too jumbled to understand. "What do you mean, something they want? What do the kids have?" Olivia shook her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. "I can't tell you that. Not yet. Not until I'm sure we're safe." Daniel clenched his fists, the frustration rising in him like a tidal wave. He had to know the truth. If he was going to help, he needed to understand what he was up against. But Olivia was not ready to tell him. And part of him understood. Part of him knew that whatever she was keeping from him was a matter of life and death, not just for her, but for the children. "How long do we have?" Daniel asked, his voice a little firmer now. "How long before they find us?" Olivia's eyes flickered toward the door, as if she could hear something that Daniel couldn't. "Not long. Maybe hours. Maybe less. We need to leave. Now." The urgency in Olivia's voice left no room for argument. Daniel didn't waste another second. He turned and walked toward the children, who were still sitting on the floor, their eyes wide with fear. They hadn't said a word since Daniel had entered the room, but their silence was more telling than anything they could have said. He knelt in front of them, his heart aching as he looked into their innocent faces. They were so small, so fragile. And yet, the weight of the world seemed to rest on their shoulders. "Hey, you guys okay?" Daniel asked softly, forcing a smile that he didn't feel. The oldest of the triplets, a girl with dark brown eyes that mirrored Olivia's, glanced up at him. Her lips trembled as she spoke, her voice barely audible. "Are we safe here?" Daniel's heart cracked. He didn't know the answer. He didn't know if they would be safe anywhere. "I'm going to make sure you're okay," he said gently, his voice steady despite the fear rising within him. "I promise." Olivia stood up, moving quickly to the door. "We need to go. Now." Daniel took one last look at the children before following Olivia. His mind raced with questions, but the only thing that mattered now was getting them out of there. He didn't know what kind of people were after them, but he knew one thing for sure: if they were going to survive, they needed to get away from this place. The streets outside were eerily quiet as Daniel and Olivia made their way to the car. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual, as if something was watching them. Every step they took felt like it could be their last. "Where are we going?" Daniel asked as they climbed into the car, the engine roaring to life. Olivia hesitated for a moment before answering. I have a place. It's remote. Safe. But we have to be careful. We can't let anyone follow us. The drive was long, and the further they went, the more Daniel could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights tailing them, but the road behind was empty. As they neared the outskirts of the city, Olivia's tension only grew. She kept glancing at the side streets, her eyes flicking nervously in every direction. We're almost there, she said, her voice strained. Just a little longer. Daniel didn't respond. His mind was too preoccupied with the events of the night, the truth Olivia had shared, the fear in her eyes, and the dangers that were closing in. But he didn't know what to expect when they arrived. He didn't know if this was really a safe place, or if they were just running into another trap. And as the car turned down a narrow dirt road, Daniel had the unsettling feeling that they were heading straight into the unknown. The car's headlights cut through the darkness as Olivia drove down the winding dirt road, the trees on either side of them towering like silent sentinels. The only sound in the car was the rhythmic hum of the tires against the gravel and the occasional creak of the vehicle as it navigated the uneven terrain. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, his mind racing. The tension between them was palpable, but it wasn't just the fear of being hunted that weighed heavily on Daniel's mind. It was the fact that he still didn't know the whole truth. Olivia had shared parts of the story, fragments of a life he hadn't known about, but she still hadn't told him everything. And in the pit of his stomach, he knew there was more. There had to be more. He glanced at her, her face tense and focused on the road. Her knuckles gripped the steering wheel tightly. As if the car itself were her only lifeline. Olivia, he said, his voice breaking the silence, we're not safe yet. We need to talk. You need to tell me everything. She didn't look at him, her eyes fixed ahead, but she nodded in acknowledgement. I know, Daniel. I know. But I don't think we have the luxury of time right now. The word stung, but Daniel understood. They didn't have time to waste. The people after them could be right behind them, and they had no idea who or what they were dealing with. Just tell me the truth, he pushed, his voice softer now. What's really going on? What do the kids have? Why are they after you? Why are they after them? Olivia's grip tightened on the wheel, and for a long moment, it seemed like she wouldn't answer. But then, finally, she spoke. I never wanted you involved in any of this, she said, her voice quiet, almost lost in the hum of the engine. I didn't want to drag you back into my world. I promised myself I'd leave that life behind, but it seems like it was never really gone. And now, she paused, her breath catching in her throat. Now it's come for me again. And it's come for my kids. Daniel leaned forward in his seat, his gaze fixed on her. What's so important about the kids? Why is everyone after them? Olivia's eyes flickered toward him for just a moment before she turned her attention back to the road. Her lips trembled slightly before she spoke again. It's not just about them. It's about me. But more than that, it's about what I did. What I was involved in before you and I ever met. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had known Olivia in one way, the way people always know each other, through the lens of their current life, their present struggles. He had no idea who she had been. And it seemed that the past she had tried to bury was finally clawing its way back to the surface. I've never been honest with you, Daniel, Olivia continued, her voice shaking now. And I've never been honest with myself. The children, they're part of something that goes way beyond me. Beyond us. I can't tell you everything yet, but I can't keep running from it either. She sighed, the weight of the world seeming to settle on her shoulders. You need to understand that what's coming isn't just a danger to me or the kids, it's a danger to everyone involved. And it all started with a decision I made a long time ago, a decision that led me into something I couldn't get out of. Daniel felt a sinking feeling in his chest, as though the ground beneath him had just vanished. What decision? What did you do? Olivia took a deep breath, the kind of breath that seemed to steady her as if she were preparing herself for something monumental. I was part of a secret operation. A covert operation. We were doing things I can't even begin to explain. But the children. They're not just innocent bystanders in this mess. They're connected to the operation. Daniel's mind reeled, trying to process the words she was saying. He had never imagined something so convoluted, so dangerous. Olivia, the woman he had once loved, had been involved in something that sounded straight out of a thriller novel. But this wasn't fiction. It was real. How are they connected? Daniel's voice was barely a whisper now, his brain struggling to catch up with the madness of the situation. Olivia swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror again. The children, they have something inside them. Something that was meant to be used as a weapon. A secret weapon. It's not something they can control, not something anyone can. But they were born into it. I couldn't let them become part of that world, Daniel. That's why I left. That's why I ran. Daniel's mind whirled. A weapon? He had heard enough to know this wasn't some random, isolated case. This was something far more sinister, something much larger than he could comprehend. He couldn't even begin to imagine what Olivia had gone through. What she had done. But if you left, Daniel began, trying to piece the puzzle together. If you left all that behind, why are they still after you? Why now? Olivia's eyes flickered, a brief flash of fear crossing her face. Because they know I have the children. They know I've been hiding them. And now they're going to do whatever it takes to get them back. Daniel's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He had no idea what kind of enemies Olivia had made, but they were clearly not the kind of people who played by any rules he understood. Where are we going? He asked, his voice tight with anxiety. You said we had a place. Is it safe? It's as safe as it's going to get, Olivia replied, her voice steady but tinged with a deep sorrow. We just need to lay low for a while. Long enough for me to figure out what we're going to do next. But Daniel wasn't so sure. The more he thought about it, the more the situation felt like it was spiraling out of control. Olivia was right, they didn't have much time. But where could they go that was truly safe? Where could anyone hide from people like the ones she was running from? As the car bounced down the dirt road, the trees beginning to thin out, Daniel caught a glimpse of something in the distance. It was a shadow, a figure moving toward them, walking slowly, methodically. His heart stopped. Olivia, stop the car. Daniel shouted, his voice hoarse with panic. She slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car came to a sudden halt. The figure was still walking toward them, the outline of a person now clearly visible in the headlights. It was a man, tall and imposing, his features hidden in the shadows. Who is that? Daniel asked, his voice trembling. Olivia's face went pale. No, it can't be. The man stopped just in front of the car, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He recognized him. He'd seen him before, years ago, at a party, a social event he had almost forgotten about. But he never thought he would see him again. Never thought this man would be part of his life. Olivia stared at the man through the windshield, her voice barely a whisper. It's him. The one I told you about. The one who knows about the children. The man stepped closer, his face slowly coming into view. His eyes were cold, calculating, and as he looked at Daniel, a sinister smile curled across his lips. Hello, Olivia, the man said, his voice smooth but filled with menace. I've been looking for you.